This man has the most magical power of all: basic logic. The fifth Ace Attorney game released was very different from the previous four. Instead of playing as Phoenix Wright or Apollo Justice like in the last game, you play as Miles Edgeworth, and the game focuses more on investigations. Furthermore, unlike Phoenix Wright, Edgeworth has to solve mysteries without magical lawyer superpowers and instead must use logic. And technology sometimes. During the development of the DS version of Trials and Tribulations, the idea of making a spin-off series with a major character came up. Originally, the plan was to have the game be about Emma Skye, but because he was more popular among fans, Edgeworth was chosen to be the star of the game. Unlike previous games in the series, Ace Attorney Investigations was the first to not be translated into any non-English languages, which led to disappointment from non-English speaking fans on the franchise. Like the previous games, Ace Attorney Investigations returns a lot of normal gameplay features you'd expect from an Ace Attorney game, such as cross-examinations, and like usual, you press statements for more information and present evidence when you find a contradiction, as well as getting penalties when you're wrong. What's different about it this time is you do it outside the courtroom. Not only that, but unlike the main series games, there are 3 cross-examination songs that play rather than 2, depending on how far you are in the case. Anyways, these confrontations between Edgeworth and witnesses, or in some cases true killers, happen in the areas he investigates to solve a crime, which obviously includes the crime scene. Investigations work quite differently from previous games, since instead of being played in first person, they're played in third person. Some areas will switch to the original investigation gameplay when Edgeworth needs a closer look at a specific area. Sometimes there might be something off in that one area, so he'll have to present evidence showing what's wrong. When examining items or areas, sometimes evidence is added to his organizer. But other times, he'll be holding on to pieces of information, which are used with his logic ability. When he's got enough information, the player just has to press the logic button and then has to figure out how and which pieces of information connect to each other. Edgeworth won't just be examining the crime scene as it is. With the help of his self-proclaimed assistant, Kay Faraday, and her device Little Thief, he'll be examining recreations of crime scenes at different points in time. Most of the time, Edgeworth will have a partner following him around who he can talk to if he wants, but it doesn't affect your progress in the game at all. Anyways, the game takes place not too long after the events of Trials and Tribulations, and unlike most games in the series, the cases, not counting flashbacks, take place out of chronological order. The game begins with Edgeworth arriving at his office late at night after being away for a while, only to discover that a murder had occurred, so he takes some time to figure out who did it. That's not very nice. Why couldn't you have done something some other time? What if Edgeworth wanted to go to bed? Assuming that Edgeworth sleeps. Near the end, despite figuring out who did it, Edgeworth is left with some mysteries, which include a great thief known as the Yatagarasu. After this case, Edgeworth thinks back to something that happened to him very recently on his plane ride home. Edgeworth ended up getting accused of murder and had to prove himself innocent. After the plane lands, Detective Gumshoe and Franziska von Karma arrived, and soon it is revealed that Franziska is working with Interpol to investigate a smuggling ring. Most of the story has more to do with that smuggling ring and the Yatagarasu than it has to do with Edgeworth himself. Not long after solving that case, Edgeworth tries to take care of a hostage situation, but ends up getting kidnapped himself. After he's found by and helped by Kay Faraday, who would end up tagging along, they had to figure out how to escape where he was being held captive. Not long after their escape, Edgeworth meets Shi-long Lang for the first time, a man who happens to be an elite Interpol investigator who has the highest successful arrest rate of all Interpol agents, who despises prosecutors and the courtroom. His arrest rate happens to be so high because his method is to immediately arrest and ask questions later, which Edgeworth definitely disagrees with. This is pretty much what the game is. Edgeworth trying to find the truth, but an Interpol agent is getting in his way. Along the way, he has to uncover the mystery surrounding the great thief Yatagarasu and the smuggling ring I mentioned previously. The story isn't overly exciting in my opinion, but Ace Attorney Investigations at the very least manages to be a decent game. Lots of new characters show up and plenty of old ones make appearances as well. Unfortunately, I felt the first 2 cases were paced a bit too quickly, and it wasn't until a bit more than halfway through the game that it got really good. The new gameplay features definitely work out really well for this game. With the game the way it is, the graphics actually look pretty good for an Ace Attorney game, and like most Ace Attorney games, the soundtrack is pretty good too. For me, while not the absolute worst game, since I really enjoyed it quite a bit, it still doesn't manage to be as good as most of the other games in the series. This wasn't the only game in the spin-off series either. It got a sequel that was never officially translated. Because of a positive fan reaction to the first investigations, it was decided that a sequel would be made. When it was revealed, it was stated that the game would focus more on Edgeworth himself than on other characters in past events. Unfortunately for fans in the West, it was confirmed around March 2011 that there were no plans to release it outside the West. It was later stated that the potential for a downloadable digital release of the game existed, but it couldn't be said that it would definitely happen. The possibility of the game getting localized had been discussed more than once in the past, and one day it was said that if Ace Attorney Trilogy HD was a success, it would increase the chances of the game getting localized. However, this was also said about Dual Destinies, and well, we still never got an official English release. Eventually, a fan translation had started, and the first 2 cases were fully translated near the end of 2013. The last 3 cases would be fully translated the next summer, and not too long after that, a fixed version of the game with all 5 cases in English had been put out. In the end, we never got an official English release, but we got a fan translation, which was definitely worth the trouble because this is one of the best games in the series. Since I played the fan translation, I will be using character names from said translation. Investigations 2, like previous games in the franchise, introduces a new gameplay element called logic chess. When a character refuses to testify, the background changes to a chessboard with the chess pieces as if Edgeworth and the other person were in a mental chess match. Instead of presenting evidence like with Phoenix's Magatama from his games, you'll be presented with 2 or more options each time Edgeworth must make a decision. There is a time limit, and when time runs out, the opponent will change their mind and not entertain Edgeworth further, so you'll have to analyze the situation quickly and adapt to the personalities of the opponents. When the opponent makes a suspicious statement, a chess piece icon appears next to one of the choices, marking it as a critical move to make to knock out one of the opponent's pieces. Edgeworth can either choose to pursue this or choose to wait to get in a better position in the game. By choosing incorrectly, waiting too long, or striking too soon, Edgeworth risks getting a penalty on his time limit. If the time runs out, he just gets a penalty and will have to start all over unless he only had 1 chance left. Unlike the previous game, this one had more to do with Edgeworth and his struggle to determine the meaning of his job, as well as his struggle to find the truth. At the beginning of the game, not long after the events of Turnabout Ablaze, the last case of the previous game, there is an incident with an attempted assassination of the president of another country, and unsurprisingly, there ends up being a murder. When the killer is caught, Edgeworth along with Kay and Gumshoe go to visit them in their detention center until something unfortunate happened. Edgeworth soon runs into someone from his past, Raymond Shields, who used to assist his father, Gregory Edgeworth, and took over Gregory's law office after he passed away. Raymond isn't too pleased about Miles becoming a prosecutor, especially since Miles was taught by Manfred von Karma, a corrupt prosecutor that had a perfect record of only guilty verdicts. Not only does Edgeworth have to deal with this at first, but a judge named Justine Courtney is set into cases that Edgeworth is investigating because Edgeworth's behavior on the attempted presidential assassination case was considered to be inappropriate. Courtney also tries to replace Edgeworth with a younger and far less intelligent prosecutor named Sebastian de Best. Despite this, Edgeworth intends to continue investigating cases, which causes him to list losing his prosecutor's badge. Raymond Shields soon ends up suggesting that Miles should become defense attorney just like his father was. Throughout the game, Edgeworth has to consider the possibility of quitting his job of being a prosecutor and being a defense attorney instead, while dealing with Justine Courtney getting in his way as he struggles to reach the truth. Overall, the story is actually pretty good, which helped make it more interesting than the previous game. Not only that, but every case in the game is good and far more interesting than the cases from the previous games, and it all leads up to an amazing final case with a mastermind that comes out of nowhere. In the end, it's really unfortunate that Capcom didn't end up localizing this because I enjoyed it quite a bit, even more than Trials and Tribulations, which has often been considered to be the best in the series. Ace Attorney Investigations 2 pretty much just took everything the previous game did right and improved on just about all of it. Investigations 2 never felt like it was paced too quickly, and none of the cases really had any huge issues that affected my enjoyment. For example, Case 3 had some really short segments at certain points, but overall managed to be a really good case. Like the previous game, this one looked pretty good too, and the soundtrack was also amazing. In the end, both Investigations games were enjoyable, but they're both on opposite ends of my list. Investigations 2 managed to become my favorite in the series because in my opinion, it's Ace Attorney at its best. Anyways, that's all for this video. If you liked what you saw, how about subscribing, liking, and adding to your favorites? You can also check out some other videos I made if you want. If you want to know when I'm screwing around, working, or complaining, just follow my social media accounts. Links are in the description.